Hello and welcome to part 1 of the Mini 30 restoration. This is a purchase I bought back many years ago in 2008 to do as a original Mini 30, but had a change of direction towards the end of it and ended up personalising it to more like a 60s Cooper style. As you can see, it wasn't too bad a condition, looked pretty well. Just use a bits of surface rust here, there and everywhere, but generally the body was really good until I delved into it and found out there was a few patches which had caused a lot of corrosion further down the line and into the sills. So as you'll see during the video restoration, this all got cut out. So walking around the vehicle, there was quite a bit of corrosion, particularly around the scuttle panel, top of the wings, as you can see here, which revealed a lot more once the wings were cut off. Also in between the screen rubber on the front, between the wiper blades, this had corrosion, so really the only option moving forward was to cut this out. The interior, however, was in really good condition. Apart from being a bit grotty from years of abuse, there was no rips or tears. Door panels were in really good condition, along with the floor carpets, which is the most important thing. Because as you get replica ones from Newton Commercial, they have heel pads in each side, which I don't particularly like. The boot floor was really good, a little bit of corrosion on the corner there just near the bolts, but that got a bit bigger once I started grinding the paint back and digging out from the underneath. It had swelled. Must have got some corrosion from in the joint where the mounting panel for the subframe is, which didn't help, but this happens on these Minis. The interior had the original sound deadening on the floors, on the majority of it, just a bit melted around the edges where someone had repaired the outer sills. So I was really chuffed with this, and this kept the originality on the floors, and I didn't want to really remove it. But as you'll see on the front corner, I had to remove a little section here because they'd had a patch in, but overall in really good condition. One thing I did notice though, I had to cut a bit of the inner sill out because when they put the patch on the floor, it corroded it and eaten in a bit further than I thought. But nothing really major, and the floors were really good condition in general for its age. The engine, however, was in really good condition with only just over 50,000 on and fully complete. It did run like a dream and sounded really nice. Pulled well as well when I went up the street and back, but I wanted a bit more power, so that was an upgraded version that I had to do. Right, so the first part we tackled was the offside rear quarter, because this was heavily corroded along with the inner wheel arch and all the edges, as you can see. So out came the grinder and started to tackle it. Obviously I stripped the interior out first to prevent any damage. So as you can see here, the inner section on the back of the door bin was corroded. So these are quite easy to repair because they're flat sections, so fabricating new pieces in the bench was relatively easy. A bit of flat plate. What I would advise is you try and get a template or measure up at least before you start cutting anything out and fabricating anything up, because it makes life a lot easier moving forwards. Once all the corrosion was cut out, I fabricated some new pieces in the workbench. Like I say, it's quite easy because they were flat and just some little return edges. So when I fabricated all that, I plug welded it in and made a bit of a curve. That's a bit difficult to make, but with a bit of perseverance and a hammer and a dolly, you can get a curved edge on. But a shrinker and stretcher would be ideal, but I don't have one of them at the moment. Maybe I should invest in one if I do anything moving forwards. So once I'd cut a lot of the stuff out, the heel board had gone a little bit as well, so it was only on the outer edges on both sides. So rather than replace the whole thing and take any strength out of the car, I just trimmed out what I needed to do and bought a replacement, a copy panel, and cut it up and did the installation, which you'll see a little bit further on in the video. In addition to the inner wheel arch, the leading edge of the boot floor had corroded, so I had to replace that. So I fabricated some flat bits of metal shaped to the same as the original and welded them in. That gave me my inner wheel arch to be able to plug weld through once it was in. This had heavily corroded for some reason, the inner arch, and had some really poor repairs done. But it had just eaten into the boot floor as well, which was a bit of a pain. As you can see from this picture, I also had to put a back panel on, hinge panel that had been damaged in the past. It had a little shunt in the boot and they had a second-hand boot on off an earlier car, and the panel wasn't the best, so I cut it off and replaced it. So once I'd done these little bits, I ended up getting everything ready, and I fitted them all, trial fitted, and then welded them all up, as you can see, with the MIG. Got quite a good heavy penetration on that. It's a decent thickness metal, so you can turn the amps up a little bit better. Also repaired just the edge of the boot floor, the floor pan itself, just there behind the jacking point. Eventually got to a stage where it was all done. Red oxide primer, I do like the red oxide. It protects it, and you can get in, and then when you stone chip over it or whatever you do, you've got a base covering the whole metal, and seam seals all the joints to stop any dampness coming in. Finally got the new inner wheel arch. Now I had to replace this on both sides. This side was quite easy because the outer wing was off. The other side was a little bit more difficult. Not getting the old one out, but actually putting a new one in with the outer wing on. It's a bit of a challenge, but it can be done. But again, just kept trial fitting, made sure everything fitted before fully welding. Eventually got to a stage where it was installed, cleaned off all the underneath, and plus again my fallback plan of red oxide primer, which is really good. Like I say, it eats into the metal, gives a good key. And when you stone chip or under seal, it actually has little knobbles, so you just get some of the burr paint below, so it just protects that from any future corrosion appearing. So again, the back panel ended up putting a new rear valance on. This is one of the only couple of things I bought genuine, because it had the correct pressings in and the studs for the rear fog lamp and that, and it did fit really well. But just the usual bit of surface rust, so just plug welded it along the seam, and got a great job done really, and it made it nice and solid at the back, and got some strength back into the boot, because it was a bit thin once you've got the boot hinge panel off and whatnot. Had to do a little bit of repairs under the backlights on the offside. Don't know whether the fuel had spilt down in the past and took the paint off and made a bit of corrosion, but nothing major, just a little bit of surface. But when you grind it back, it's worth cutting out if you can, and making it a solid job. So underneath was all cleaned off. Like I said, put another edge on the back of the boot and did a bit of boot repair work. You can just see the welds penetrated through there. They got ground back and cleaned up along with the battery tray. But generally it was quite a solid car. Not a massive amount of welding required on the back end, a bit, but nothing untoward. So the next stage was, once the rear quarter was on, was to get some red oxide primer on. Again, my favourite go-to. This just stops any dampness attacking the panel and causing any rust, particularly where you've done the spot welds. And non-genuine rear quarter, but it fitted really well. I just joined it just above the swage line on the B and C post. Easy to blend in, easy to repair, and did a nice little butt weld so you don't get any distortion whatsoever. Then moved on to the near side. This is a bit above the subframe, a bit of corrosion where the mount was, where it touched it, a bit of sponge in it, I think from original, probably got wet, and just rotted it out. But it was an easy repair once the inner arch was out. Just a bit difficult working from underneath, but it's not a massive job, and cleaned up really well. And they got the old paint out and repaired it all. Same as the other side, the heel board had corroded and like a return edge. They again, really easy to make. Just fold it in the bench, bit of angle iron really, that's all you need, and a panel beating hammer, and you can get a nice sharp edge on. As long as you do a template, like I say, or measure it, always helps. And photographs, they're the key in doing any restoration, anyone would tell you. But once I fabricated everything up, I welded it all in with the MIG at this stage and got some nice welds on it, good and solid, good penetration again, because it was a bit thicker, the metal. It makes life a bit easier, and you can get the amps up a bit, so you get a really good penetration. And it's important really on the heel bore, because that holds the whole rear suspension on. So we need to make sure that's good, solid and secure, and as good as original. So there we are with that section. So this was, once I got all the heel board in, I had to try and manipulate in the new rear inner arch, which was a bit of a tricky situation, trying to squeeze it in with the rear quarter on, because although the gap's big enough, when you're sliding it in, it just gets a bit tight. But managed it. Had to do a bit of repair on the edges again of the boot floor, just to accept the plug welds. But it all happened, you know, and you have to expect these bit of a challenges with restoration. It happens really. It's just difficult, but you get over it, you know, and that's a challenge, I suppose. People love a challenge, some more than others, but I don't mind a challenge. It's nice to get an achievement once you have done it. So the next bit was to make the lower rear quarter. Now, it didn't really need a full quarter on this, it was just the bottom edge had done. So as you can see where the mole grips are, I made the outer panel. And I did a butt weld on this one rather than flange it or put a press in the panel, because it's a bit difficult. So with it being just a 8-inch piece, I just made a nice little piece with a curve on, welded an edge on it, ground it flush, made sure it fitted, and then just MIG welded it in, spot welded it first just to make sure I didn't get any bad fitments. And you know, as you can see there, it fitted like a glove really. I have very, very little gaps so I can get a bit of penetration and try and stop the distortion. And then just spot welded it along and along and along, and eventually just got it fully welded and ground it back, and it was as good as new. The rear quarter was good on the passenger side, so I didn't see the point of replacing it really when there's no need to, when you can just put a corner repair section in. And it's always the best way to do it if you can really. So we then move on to removing the sill on the driver's side. I didn't cut the full step off because there was no need to again, just try and keep some of the integrity of the proper car, or the original car. As you can see, the corrosion on the inner sill, this is where the outer sill had been patched and melted the paint off, and then the dampness had got to it. Not great really, but considering it was 30 plus years old, it's pretty damn good for a modern Mini. So usual, cut out the corrosion, cut the floor panel out. This is a view from underneath the car looking up into the shell, so the driver's floor pan. Cut all that out along with the inner flinch panel from the inner wheel arch and some of the sill step in preparation for installing the repair sections. Now, I didn't buy a floor pan for this because there was no need to. I bought inner sills and I bought outer sills, but I did trim the outer sills down because the ones you get are, I think, 9-inch return and the originals are 4.5. So I wanted it to be as original as possible. So I cut them down with the grinder to the 4.5-inch, prepped all the areas around, and then started firstly putting the inner sill in because that was my starting point to make good of the biggest gap, and then you can fabricate all your panels around that. So this is the bottom of the inner wheel arch, which I bought a full panel for this, but again, didn't really warrant it. It had gone a little bit at the top, a little bit at the bottom, but I just cut and carved and crafted a piece in to make it properly solid. So once the inner sill was in, the other genuine part I bought was a jacking point, because you can't buy them non-genuine, along with the scuttle panel. Got the inner sill in, got the sill step in so the strength was back in the car, and then mold grip the outer sill on just so I was happy. So this is here with the new inner sill on and the jacking point at the front. Actually, it's not the jacking point, I do apologise, that's a lining up for the jig in the factory. The jacking point's right in the middle, which isn't fitted as yet, and half the sill step. Again, I bought this because the contoured quite good really to make them fit. So as you can see, I spot welded all the way along where all the original spot welds were to try and keep the strength in it, and then fully welded where it needed to onto the A post. I didn't brace the doors on the car, door openings, and people say you should do, and I never have with any of my cars. Whether I've just been really lucky, door gaps have always lined up, I don't know, but I would advise really, if you're stripping it down, you should brace them with some box section, but sometimes you don't think at the time, you just go willy-nilly with a grinder. Anyway, this is a section of the A-post all cleaned up, half new, half existing or original, so I didn't, like I say, I wanted to keep the originality of it where I could really. All the inner wheel arch now cleaned up, outer sill on, I think, on that photo, yeah. So I can then start trimming the replacement panel to fill in the holes. Luckily the door hinge panel was okay where the hinges went, so I didn't have to worry about lining them up. So eventually got round finishing the floor off inside. Like I said, I made all these pieces. I couldn't justify buying a floor pan for a couple of flat angled pieces, and I thought I may as well do them myself. A bit of sense of achievement of doing your own fabrication, and a bit of cost, because a sheet steel is a lot cheaper to buy than a whole floor pan to just use a small element of it. Again, underneath, did it all fully welded and then ground it all back. But as you can see, the floor pans were really, really good. So it didn't justify putting a full one in, to be honest. It's just, it would have been just a lot more work for no real extra gain, and I still got the look I wanted as original, and why would you not do that? So now this was the lower inner wheel arch. Again, I cut this section out of a new panel. I did buy a new panel for this because I wanted the top bit, which is a bit of a tricky bit round where the air intake is. So trimmed off what I needed to do and fully seam welded it in, butt welded, so I don't have any steps or gaps, and I got nice penetration all the way through. This is the bottom bit down towards the subframe, again just showing where I fully welded it in and ground it all back. Very hot there, where you can see the discoloration from the grinding, because the weld was quite heavy, but I wanted a heavy weld to make sure it didn't corrode in the future and be solid. This is the genuine jacking point. You can't buy these as a copy for some reason. You can only get them from the original pressing. So once I tacked it in position and I was happy, I fully welded it all the way around, and then I got the old red oxide out again and coated everything in, which I do find really works. It's not as good as the old-fashioned stuff, but it still does a good job. So eventually, with the sill step on and all the floor painted, that I was well on the way with the offside. Had to carry out similar sort of repairs to the near side, sill again, trim that back, and the usual sill steps and the inner sills and a bit of the floor. But again, nothing major for its age. It was, the beauty was, because it was only had a very low owners, they obviously cared for the car. It was just unfortunate they must have trusted the people doing the repairs, and probably if they were a bit elderly, probably didn't get round and check and moan about it, but they just wanted it on the road. This was the scuttle, as you can see, quite corroded, because all the muck gets up, and what happens, there's a panel that goes underneath the scuttle. They rot out, and that gets all the muck into the scuttle, which rots, and then it all sits on top of the plastic vent, and then it just eats away and eats away. So cut all that out. I did put a genuine full scuttle panel on and re-stamped the original chassis number in, which people said, oh, what did you do that for? But, you know, you can't go ringing cars. There's that many Minis that say they are what they are and they're not, the complete ringers. I thought if I put the chassis number in, then that prevents it from being rung in the past, in the future. So I did get this panel, like I said, because it had all the right pressings and the hole gaps in the right place for the vents. So I thought it's worth putting in and doing that. So eventually, once all that was welded up, got all the engine bay cleaned up. Obviously the engine was out and the subframes were all off. The subframe was still on there. Just cleaned up everything and got all the inner wings to a good standard, and then got my old red oxide out and get it all painted. It just make you move forwards and give you a bit of enthusiasm to crack on with the rest of the car. The bulkhead was just the usual surface rust round where the brake master cylinders overflow with fluid when people are bleeding the brakes. But there's no scuttle panel on there, so it was a great opportunity to get right up to the top edge and get some red oxide on. Same with the drivers, the passenger inner wing, that was really good, but you can just see there at the bottom right hand corner that was untouched at the moment. For some reason that wasn't corroded on the heater vent. So just moving back to the scuttle, so you can the new scuttle's replaced on this, and you can see the little infill panel underneath. I bought these because they're only cheap. I think they're about £5 or £6 at the time, but it just stops any muck going up from the wheels and corroding the future new scuttle. So there's a new scuttle in place. Had to put a second-hand door on, which I got from a local guy who was breaking I think it was a Mayfair, but it was a real good door and it fitted like a glove. So I was very happy and quite reasonably priced. Then I got to the stage of setting all the panels up. Now I didn't get any original panels. I ended up with I think 3 wings on one side, non-genuine, because I couldn't get them to fit. But you have to just dress. It was really bad, so but I got a real good one in the end, and a little bit of dressing up in the front panel, and it all lined up really well. And I got the nice gaps what I wanted round the headlamp to front panel. These are just all where it's just riveted on with mould grips, or clamped on, sorry, with mould grips, just as a trial, because you want to make sure everything fits bonnet, boot and doors before you start welding everything on. It's the most important thing, because once you start fully welding it on, it's very, very difficult to get it off. So make sure the gaps are right, that's the important thing, and your doors fit, and your lines are where you want them to be. And then once you've got a couple of spot welds on, just recheck them again, and just constantly keep going back and checking. That's all I can advise you to do. You'll get a great fit then, and get the results you're after. Again, this is the passenger side. Put the little inner scuttle repair panel in. Again, just stops all the muck blowing up into the scuttle and rotting it out in the future. I also seamed with seam sealer all the inside seams of the A panels and the wings to inner wings and everything, just to stop the water ingress from when it gets used on the road. So like I normally do, I try to brush on seam sealer and all the joints, a bit like what they do from the original. A bit rough and ready, but that's how they were thrown on in the factory, and I suppose anything's better than nothing. And then that's so the next stage was to clean the floor pans off. This had this hard wax oil type coating that they used to use. It was very similar to the Fiesta, even similar year, 88, 89. So it must have been a modern thing, but it really did protect it. As you can see, the floors they had little paint on them, but that coating they put on really had protected them. Again, the damage only occurs really where people have welded it and not treated it properly. They put Schultz on or stone chip, and they don't coat it with a base coat first, because it, like I say, it has little holes in it, and then the rust eats into it, and then it spreads like wildfire. So again, once I cleaned it all up, you can just see the edge of the sill where I trimmed it off to have the openings to let the water run out or any condensation. Got my trusty red oxide paint out and sprayed it. As you can see, just working off the axle stands about 12 inches off the floor. Not ideal in a domestic garage, but you have to just do what you have to do. Eventually, after a bit of filling, as you can see all the dust there, managed to seam seal all the joints again, just to stop any dampness getting into them and causing future corrosion, because that's one thing I think people may miss out on. Try and seal the inside as well as the outside, and just stop any of that dampness, and then ensure it's dry and warm when you do it. Now I've got to a stage where all the wings are on, and you can just see the front panel all sealed up and all around the headlamp rings, just again to stop the water getting in, because once the water's in, it gets to places, particularly where you spot welded or plug welded them on. It just rusts, and before you know it, you've no wings left. So I bought wooden picket wheel arches for these. It took me a lot of time to choose, not the cheap plastic ones, the fiberglass ones, but they had the inner lining, so they were like a full arch. So that was the next stage, was to trial fit all them and make sure they were good. What I did have to do is trim out the front wings and the front panel a little bit, because of the 6x10s I put on. They catch the wheel arches for some reason. So I just had to trim it out, but I made sure all the arches fitted, all the panels fitted before moving further forwards with the final prep for paint. Even put it back down on its wheels, so I got a true representation of the body on its actual wheels. I know there's no trimming engine, so it's quite high off the ground, but at least all the way it was on the wheels, so everything settled down, which allowed me to make sure I got all the doors set and the bonnet set and everything set right, wheels and whatnot, even though I'm on my 12-inch wheels at the moment there. So as you can see, all the driver's side's now done. My garage is a bit of a mess, which I've moved on a long way since then, with insulated walls and floor carpet tiles and whatnot. But at the time, it was just a bare concrete, which wasn't a bad thing, because it was easy to dry off and clean for painting. Eventually got the shell in paint. I think the only thing I didn't need to do was the bonnet, the boot and the roof. They were all in really good condition. So shell's now in primer, all underneath, and ready for the usual blocking down and preparation. I did the full lot. The only thing I didn't rip out really was the wiring loom. I just tied it up out the way, because there's no need really to drag it out through the roof. I wasn't doing anything on the roof. The roof sort of level, but yeah, you feel a great sense of achievement and a big move forwards once you start getting the primer down inside and that. And inner arches looked okay really, considering the way I had to put them all in and the welding. I was really happy really. It did move on well, and it doesn't take long once you've got the primer on to start looking at getting colour on. Again with the bulkhead, that was all cleaned, painted. What I did do, I stone chipped all the floor pans. What I didn't do under the wheel arches, I wanted them smooth paint, but it was really just to protect it. But as you can see, the transformation from when you start to finish is great. It's a great sense of achievement for yourself, whether you're putting a wheel arch in or doing a full restoration. You know, there's a bit of a skill, but I'm all self-taught, and it's just using a bit of common sense and having a proper plan in your head of how you're going to tackle stuff, without having to go back on yourself loads of times. I try and start in one corner and work my way around, as you've seen with the videos, and you come back to the start point and the end, and always try and prep up and do the best you can to minimise any future repair works or dressing up after you've got it all in paint, because it's easy to throw the paint on and the primer, and then you've got to start filling and doing all the repairs. It's sort of it's a step backwards really. So if you do it as you go along, when you do come, it's just the final tweaks and just addressing what needs to be done, what you've missed, because you always will miss something, you know, and you've not got the proper lighting like in a proper spray booth or a body shop, unless you have got a body shop, that is. But you know, you can get the results. So I just primed everything, the whole lot again on the axle stands in the floor in the garage. A bit difficult, but you have to do it, and you know, it fills it in at the end, and as long as you get primer on it and then time you've blocked it down, it's all ready for whatever you need to do. So that's where I'm up to at the moment, and the next video will be laying the paint down and probably doing some painting of the ancillary equipment. So anyway, next one to follow. Thanks very much.